I'm Warren Hogue, IPI's Senior Advisor for External Relations, and I'm happy to welcome you to this Beyond the Headlines event featuring Alex Perry, author of Lifeblood, How to Change the World One Dead Mosquito at a Time, and Ray Chambers, Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General for Malaria and a central figure in the book. Malaria is the world's most contagious disease. It infects 250 million people a year and kills 800,000 of them. Besides the human toll, the cost to Africa alone is estimated to be more than $12 billion a year. Ray Chambers is a Wall Street pioneer and philanthropist who turned his business and marketing skills to the goal of drastically reducing children's deaths caused by malaria. In February 2008, he became Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's special envoy to mobilize global support for action against malaria. Using an entrepreneurial approach, one uniting political and business leadership and the power of publicity, he built one of the largest aid campaigns the world has ever seen. It was a campaign that drew in presidents, celebrities, scientists, and attracted billions of dollars. His method also brought a business-like coherence, transparency, and organization to disbursement efforts, providing a positive response to the complaints of many developing world leaders that aid from abroad was often not distributed in a way that addressed the problems that they had identified at home. Alex Perry is Time Magazine's Africa Bureau Chief. A Briton, I was about to say until I learned tonight that he is a Briton born in Philadelphia. So a Briton and also a Yank. He is based in Cape Town and covers 48 countries in the sub-Saharan Africa. In the book, he follows Ray Chambers through 2 years of the campaign, 2009 and 2010. Having spent 3 years in the Far East, 5 in India, and more than 4 in Africa, Alex writes that he often pondered the question, does external aid really work? In 2009, he heard about a charity called Malaria No More UK and got in touch with Ray Chambers, a co-founder. In the book, he gives an arresting account of his first conversation with Ray and his decision to take up the story, but I'm going to leave that for Alex himself to tell you about when I turn the floor over to him in a moment. Ray Chambers set the ambitious goal of getting an insecticide-laden net to everyone who needed one by the end of 2010. Though he missed that target, he managed to distribute 300 million nets, many of them to some of the most remote and inaccessible parts of the African continent. As a direct consequence, hundreds of thousands of children's lives were saved. Some have focused on the missed target, but Alex argues that the focus ought instead to have been on more important statistics: the number of nets passed out, the number of children's lives saved. From my reading about him in the book, Ray Chambers is clearly not the type to be thwarted by a temporary setback. So I'm eager to find out tonight how the campaign is doing, even though it is 9 months after his end of 2010 deadline. The New York Times, a paper that some of you will know I like to cite as often as I can, chose as the reviewer of Alex's book Brian Burrow, a Vanity Fair financial journalist who has gained fame over the years by chronicling Wall Street miscreants and Wall Street misdeeds in books like Barbarians at the Gate and movies like Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps. Here's what this frisky critic of Wall Street had to say in the New York Times Sunday Book Review on August 11th about the Ray Chambers campaign and the account of it written by Alex Perry. Quote, corporate chieftains tend to have an overarching faith in the curative powers of modern management, goal setting, incentivizing, metrics, accountability, the whole shebang. People like Ross Perot and Mitt Romney have sought to introduce this kind of thinking into government circles with mixed results, but it's in the realm of charity, and especially international aid, where these methods are really succeeding beyond the confines of the corporation, as Alex Perry, chief African correspondent at Time magazine, demonstrates convincingly in Lifeblood, How to Change the World One Dead Mosquito at a Time. This widely praised book, by the way, is for sale at the door, and Alex will be right here when we finish to sign copies. So I'm glad this evening to add Alex Perry to the list of distinguished authors who have spoken at IPI, and it is a real added bonus for us having the protagonist of the book, Ray Chambers, on stage also. So Alex and Ray, welcome to IPI, and the floor is yours.
Hi. Evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. I thought rather than read an extract, I'd talk a little bit about the themes in the book. And then Ray and I are going to talk, and then Ray and I and Warren are going to talk, and then Ray and I and Warren and you guys are going to talk, kind of like a sort of contagion disease of conversation. Let me start off with a few facts about malaria. Malaria covers half the world. Potentially 3 billion people can contract it in any one year. Between 250 and 500 million do. And at the start of the campaign that the book concerns, 1 million people a year were dying from it. It's a disease that primarily kills children. You build a certain immunity to it. But you don't do that as a baby, and basically children under 5 are the most vulnerable. They are the overwhelming victims of the disease. And aid would seem to be an obvious way to attack this disease, because aid has had a pretty good record against disease. There's the near eradication of polio, the eradication of smallpox, Jimmy Carter's fantastic efforts to eradicate the guinea worm disease, good interventions against tetanus, syphilis, iodine deficiency. The list is quite long and honorable. But there is a gathering skepticism towards aid for 2 reasons. One is whether, despite these achievements, whether it is delivering value for money, whether they might be saving basically more lives per buck. New York's own William Easterly, who's a noted aid skeptic and perhaps not the most neutral arbiter on the subject, however, using the World Bank statistics of a program I ran in Nigeria, came up with a particularly egregious assessment of the value for money that aid delivered. He discovered that on this one program, it had taken $3,521 to raise one poor person's income for 1 year by $3.65. So it's that kind of poor value for money that is increasingly haunting aid. And a kind of related concern is how aid increasingly resembles big business. Global aid right now is worth $126 billion a year. And aid functions very much like business. Aid contracts are awarded by competitive tender. NGOs are structured very much like companies. There's a CEO overseeing managers in charge of departments like marketing and human resources. Aid workers follow a very similar kind of career structure. They start off in the regions, in this case perhaps an African village or a developing world capital, and they work their way through to up the ladder to a corporate HQ. In this case it would be, say, the UN agency headquarters in Geneva or New York. And for this they're very generously compensated. If you take a senior manager at a UN agency in, say, Eastern Congo, who's responsible for perhaps feeding all the refugees in Eastern Congo in certain camps, his salary will be between $139,000 and $204,000 a year. Add on to that a $75,000 car, $6,000 or $7,000 a month for the villa on Lake Keyview. kids' education, flights home, business class, flights to aid conferences around the world, flights to